welcome back to Heart Books. Today I'm here to do my September part 2 wrap up. So this month or the second half of the month I guess I should say, I read a lot of contemporary. Like I'm pretty sure all but one were contemporary romances. And I think that's because if you watch my August or my September part 1 wrap up, I read a ton of paranormal in those months. So I think I just kind of wanted a little bit of a break. And I know that's kind of opposite because now we're in fall and I'm reading contemporary, but I'm sure I'll get back to paranormal soon. But yeah, so a lot of these are contemporaries and a lot of them I read on my Kindle. So I don't necessarily have the book to show you guys, but I will make sure to link them down below so that you guys can go check them out on Goodreads and find them if you want to. So the first one is Miracle on Fifth Avenue by Sarah Morgan. This is book 3 in her New York series. I just read Sunset in Central Park right before this one, and I loved this. This was probably my favorite in the series so far. I have been waiting for Eva's story for so long. She's probably my favorite character out of the books. She's like the hopeless romantic. She believes in happily ever afters, and she kind of just has stars in her eyes, which doesn't mean she doesn't have any troubles, because she's definitely had a lot of hardships, and she lost her grandmother, which was kind of her only family. So it follows her, and it is a Christmas book, but I didn't care. I still read it in September, and I loved it. So basically, her guy that she gets together with is an author, and he's an author of like horror, like really gruesome books. So, and he has a really troubled kind of past as well, and he's gone through a lot. Basically, Eva is hired by his grandmother, the author, whose name is Lucas Blade, to kind of go take care of him in a way. He's kind of been reclusive writing, and his grandmother pays Eva, and she's like a friend, to go basically stock his fridge with food and make sure he has some Christmas cheer. So the two of them could not be more opposites, and I love a good opposites attract. So this was absolutely adorable. The two of them kind of form a relationship, and it goes from there. If you like a good opposites attract like me, or you love Sarah Morgan, you have to read this book. It was so good. And I know Sarah Morgan has a new Christmas book coming out, not in this series, but I think it's called The Christmas Sisters, and I'm very, very excited to read that as well. So yeah, I gave this 5 out of 5. It was absolutely perfect. The next one I read was How to Marry a Marquis by Julia Quinn. This is one of her, I don't remember what series this is in. I think it's in like her Protectress of the Crown trilogy, but it's pretty much a standalone. I really enjoyed this one. This is basically about our main character. What was her name? Elizabeth, who I think goes by Lizzie. And she's raising her siblings because her parents have both passed away. So she's got a lot on her shoulders. And even though they have a title, they are completely poor. Like they do not have anything going for them. It's one of those title but with no money situations. So basically Lizzie is working for Lady Danbury, and she is in her library one day and finds this book called How to Marry a Marquis. I think I'm saying that right. And she thinks it's completely silly and like there's no point to it, but then she starts flipping through it and she's like, maybe, like it's not that she necessarily wants to marry Marquis, but she needs the money. She just doesn't know what else to do. So she figures maybe she'll kind of like try out some of these tips that this book has on how to kind of marry a Marquis. In comes James, who we find out is related to Lady Danbury, but he's posing as like a person who works for her instead, and there's like a whole little like mystery aspect going on because of that. So basically she decides she's gonna try out some of her kind of ideas on him because he's not a Marquis, supposedly. And basically one thing leads to another. This was hilarious. Like this just was perfect of Julia Quinn. Like this just showed how well she does humor in her romances, and I just absolutely love this book. It has the cutest cover too. So if you like Julia Quinn but haven't picked this one up, definitely do. The next one I read was an ebook, and that was Nordic King by Karina, Halle, or Hale, whichever way you say it. I give this one 5 out of 5 stars too. I absolutely love this. This is book 3 in her like royal series, which is all about like Nordic royalty, and I read the first 2 books and loved them. So this is about our king Axel, who is basically he's king, but he's pretty young, and he has a tragic past. Why do all the characters have tragic pasts? But anyways, his wife died a few years ago, so he's raising his 2 young daughters, who are I think 5 and 6 in the book, or 4 and 6, and so he basically needs a nanny, and they hire one, which obviously goes through a lot of strains because they are royalty. So they hire a nanny to help take care of the girls. I have to say, at first I was a little unsure because it's such a cliche to have like the nanny fall for like the king, but it was done so well. I loved it. This was my favorite in her series and my favorite Karina Halle book that I've read so far. I just loved it. The characters were perfect. She was feisty and she knew what she wanted, and she knew that he needed someone to kind of help him come out of this shell that he kind of built around himself from all the things in the past. And don't get me wrong, for the first like quarter of the book, that guy was a jerk and I did not enjoy it, but it wasn't in a way that made him like unredeemable, if that makes sense. He was basically just super rude. But she kind of just took that for what it was worth and moved on, and it was like a slow build too. It didn't happen overnight. The book definitely takes place, I'd say it takes place over like a year-ish. And it wasn't until the last like maybe quarter of the book that they actually got together, and I thought that was really well done because it would not have been believable for that smart of a woman to just jump into like a relationship with a king. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of like, you know, she's a commoner, she's not the same place as he is. So I thought it was just perfect. If you like a royalty romance, definitely check out Nordic King by Karina Halle. Then I read two more contemporary romances, and the first one is called Cheat Codes, and it's by Emily Goodwin, and it's part of her Dawson family series. Two books in the series are about the same couple and called Cheat Codes and Endgame, and so they're kind of like a duology within the series, and I loved it. Our main character Quinn is super smart. She works for a tech company. She basically created an app and sold it, and she's made a lot of money, but she works at a tech company now, and she's like 27, I think. Super smart. She knows what she's doing, but at the same time she doesn't, and that's so relatable. Like, she's good at her job, but like that doesn't mean she has everything else figured out. Quinn basically comes home for her brother's engagement party, and she sees her brother's best friend, who she has had a crush on since forever. I think they're about 4 or 5 years apart, so she was about 14 when her brother was going to college, and it was her brother's roommate. So it's one of those, but I loved it. I thought it was so cute. I loved Quinn. I loved our main male character, which I'm blanking on his name. Why can I never remember their names? But he was great too. He was a doctor. It was Archer. Got it. It was Archer. So he was a doctor and he was finishing like his residency. There was just a lot of really like common sense problems in this story. Like, they lived in different cities. They both had jobs they loved and necessarily didn't want to give up. They also had the whole thing of like, my brother's gonna kill you if he finds out. So I just really enjoyed it. If you're looking for like a brother's best friend story, or just one that has a really sweet love story, definitely check out these two books. Cheat Codes is the first one, and I really, really loved it, and I can't wait to continue on the Dawson family series. I think the next one comes out in a few months. The next one I read was Good Luck With That by Kristan Higgins, and we did a live show for this. So this was the pick for the Happily Ever Afters book club that Jen from Jen Talks Audiobooks hosts and runs. So we did our live show the other day for this, and it was so much fun. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Basically, this book follows 3 friends who meet at like a fat camp and when they're teenagers, and then it flashes forward to about 15 years later, and it kind of just looks at each of their lives and what they're going through. And it, like I think I said in my book haul, it really does touch on a lot of kind of areas that are really tough to both, I would assume, write and also to read about. Like, it wasn't necessarily the easiest read because I think it really did make you kind of think about yourself and your own life. Because it deals with like weight and body image and all those things, but I felt like it was a really good read, and I was glad I read it, and I loved the growth of these characters. The 3 girls just go through so much, and I loved it. There were romances in here as well. So for all the girls, they had someone, but it wasn't a perfect relationship, and I actually really liked that. It showed that each relationship had flaws, and if you're looking for a good, like, I'd say this is a more women's fiction than romance, but I still really enjoyed it, and it had like a little bit of everything. Definitely pick this one up and go check out the live show. It's on Jen's channel. This one I read was Shadow and Ice by Gena Showalter, and I actually read it earlier in the month, but I'm pretty sure I didn't talk about it in my previous wrap up. So this one is her new series, and I read it actually for one of my read list videos, so check that one out. But it is kind of so it's a new series for her, and it definitely had a really interesting premise. So it basically follows these 2 sisters. This is like the start of the book, so I don't want to give it away, but these 2 sisters are on like this vacation in the Arctic Circle, like they're kind of like hiking, and they get lost, and they stumble upon this cave of these warriors that have been like frozen in ice. for a long time. And you kind of saw the backstory of the warriors and kind of the war that they're fighting before this. Basically, they come out of the ice, and that's kind of where the story starts. It was a really interesting premise, and I really enjoyed it. The main character was the most like feisty, kick-butt heroine. I really enjoyed her, and our main hero was definitely alpha male. Like, if you like yourself an alpha male, this is one of them. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars, I gave it 4 stars, was because of the nature of these warriors and the kind of war that they are in. Basically, that is their life. Like, I feel like I'm not explaining this well, but basically, because there was so much about war and warriors, it was a little bit too much for me. Like, it was almost too much of that. So I did give it 4 instead of 5, but I really liked it, and I think a lot of that, I'm sure this is going to be a series, so it was kind of trying to build the world and the mythology and stuff like that. And I feel like maybe I read it too quickly too. Like, maybe I didn't give it like enough, so I need to go back and like relook at it, but I definitely liked it. And if you are a Gena Showalter fan, definitely check out this new series. Shadow and Ice is the first one, because I'm sure you're gonna love it. And the last book that I read for this month of September was Not So Nice Guy by R.S. Gray. This is her newest release that came out, I think a couple months ago now, but I just hadn't got to it yet. I love R.S. Gray. She's one of my favorite authors, especially for like a romantic comedy. This one followed 2 best friends who are 2 teachers at a high school, and they met a few years ago, like when they started at the high school, and they are just best friends. They do everything together, but they're not dating. And they've always said like they're better as best friends. They don't want to date, even though their family and their friends are like, you're already together all the time anyways, why don't you just date? So basically that's how the story starts, but obviously it's a romance, so I think we probably can figure out what happens. But it was amazing. I loved it. It was one of those stories where like you kind of know what's gonna happen, but it was about like watching it happen that was so entertaining. Both of them were really interesting characters and had their quirks and stuff. It was really interesting having them both be teachers too. I thought that was an interesting aspect to it. And I just love R.S. Gray. She's hilarious. Like, her writing makes me laugh out loud every time. So if you're looking for a good romantic comedy, definitely check out any of her books, but definitely this one, which was Not So Nice Guy. I gave it 4 out of 5. Okay guys, so those are all the books I read for the second half of September. Let me know what you guys are reading, or if you've read any of these, and what your feelings on them were. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!